So, I think Matt's just joined us. Matt, thanks for joining us. So we've got a good group this morning. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join the workshop this morning. So I'd like it, if we can, I'd love for it to be an opportunity for you to share some of the things that are happening for you in your businesses and get some support and some feedback. We've got more people joining us, so I'll just let them into the room. But I'd love it. I'm going to share some principles and some information this morning, but I'd also love for you to kind of have the opportunity just to kind of meet each other, have some discussions, share some of your experiences as well. Oh, we've got a few people joining us in the waiting room, so we'll just let them in at the moment. Morning, James.
Morning. How are you?
Morning. I can't hear you, James.
You
might be on. I don't know if you're on mute.
No, I'm not on mute.
Doesn't look like you're on mute. No, I can see your lips moving, but I can't hear you.
Right, I'll
like a magic trick.
I'll rejoin. Hang on a second.
You're gonna rejoin? Yeah. No worries. Yeah, sometimes Zoom settings kind of go a bit of AWOL. But welcome everybody. Good morning. So we've got a great group this morning. Thank you. Matt's with us. Sandeep, Jason, Harvey, Feroz, Dorcas, Artie, Hitton. Thank you all for joining this morning. I appreciate it. I'd love for this morning to be, as I said before, interactive. So you've got a couple of choices. You can either come off mute and have a quick conversation if you'd like to say hi, or on your menu bar, you'll see on your settings bar, there is a chat function. So if you'd like to hit the chat, feel free to drop into the chat. I'd love to hear, where are you this morning? I'm just going to put in there. Hi all, this is the chat. So we've got the chat going. There's the chat. James, good morning again.
Morning. Can you hear me okay?
Still can't hear you. Hold on, James. Hold on. Let me try that. Try that again, James.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. You're through. Yeah. Gotcha. Good to hear from you. Thanks, James. How are you, James?
I'm good. Yeah, how are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Yeah, very well. Yeah, good. Thank you for joining us this morning. Hi, Sandeep. Sandeep's on the chat in Southeast London. Sandeep, you can hear James. Brilliant. It must have been my end. That's good. We're all here. James, where are you based? Remind me.
Glasgow.
Glasgow, that's right. Yeah, you said that. Was it last week or the week before we saw each other?
Yeah, I think it was last week, actually. Yeah.
It was last week. Yes, just feels like
I know. Weeks turn into weeks, turn into months.
They do. They certainly do. Thanks for joining us, James. Good to see you again.
Good morning, Justin. This is Harbijan here. Sorry, just connecting through a moment ago.
Harbijan. Good to see you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us this morning, Harbijan. Appreciate it.
Excellent. No, it's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Good to hear you and see everybody. Thanks to everyone else that's joined. I think we've just had Stacey's just joined us as well. Morning, Stacey.
Hey, how you doing?
Very well, thanks, Stacey. Yeah, very well. You?
I've finally been able to get on at a time that I'm not at work. So yeah, really excited for this one. So thanks.
Brilliant. Pleasure. Thank you for joining us, Stacey. I appreciate it. That's great to hear you and see you. Jason's here as well. Hi, Jason. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Morning, Jason. Thank you for joining us. Good to hear you.
No problem at all. Nice to be here.
Thank you. And Matt's here as well. Just saw Matt pop up on camera. So thank you, Matt, for joining us.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, thanks, Matt. Perfect. You are with us. Brilliant. Okay, we've got a good group this morning. Thank you, everybody, for taking some time on your Friday morning to join us. What we're going to talk about this morning is, I think, probably the most challenging leadership topic of all, and that is managing underperforming teams or underperformance in business. And I think it's one of the things that, as I reflect on my own career, having led different businesses in the corporate world, and trying to figure out, when you make that transition to leadership from whatever job you were doing previously, generally speaking, the reason you get put into a leadership position is because you've been a high performer. And normally that distinction with high performance, it's almost as if we're blind to anything else. So we have these expectations of our own performance, and then when we come into contact with people who perhaps aren't quite hitting the mark, it can be really difficult for us to even understand and comprehend it. So I think that's one of the big challenges when we've when we're leaders and we're trying to manage underperforming teams. But we'll look at some principles today that will be useful. Before we do that, I'm going to give you a chance just to meet each other. We've got about 12 people in the group today, so I'm just going to put you into a couple of breakout rooms. In fact, I'll probably put you into 3 breakout rooms. That'll be 3 groups of 4. I'd just love for you to do a quick introduction to each other, and then talk about, if you don't mind, just talk about your experience of performance in business and managing underperformance. How are you managing underperformance? Have you done it in the past? And what are some of the themes that you're noticing today? Because this will link directly then to the session that we'll run after that. So I'm just going to invite you to do that so that it makes it a bit more of a kind of personal and interaction discussion today. So I'm just going to create them automatically. So we've got, just 4. We've got 3 breakout rooms. There'll be 4 of you in each room. So just a quick round of introductions, and then just your experience of managing underperformance and managing performance in business, and what are some of the challenges that you're facing today. And then when we regroup, you'll be in 3 rooms. When we regroup, if one of you from the group could just give a quick summary of what your room had discussed, and then we'll go into the sessions. Does that sound all right to everybody?
Yeah, sure.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, let me open up the rooms. I'll give you 10 minutes on this, and I'll join one of the rooms. Right, I'll give you 10 minutes on this, because you want chance for everybody to have a say and kind of get to know each other, and then find out what are some of the common themes. So enjoy your discussions. We'll be back in 10 minutes. I'll open the rooms, and you can just literally need to click on join, and you'll be away. I'm just going to resume our recording for the session this morning. So discussion about kind of your leadership experience, in particular thinking about managing underperformance, as we said at the start of the session, possibly one of the
Hi,
most
good morning, Francis. This is
responsibilities,
Hiten Joshi, just calling as arranged.
one of the most difficult experiences of leadership. So I'm just going to, I'll kind of work through room by room. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you've got someone that's happy to speak on behalf of your group. Room 1 was James, Jason, Pauline, Sandeep and Dorcas. Did somebody agree that they would be happy to share back?
We kind of ran out of time, if I'm being honest, Justin. So Sandeep and I got into a deep conversation, and then we missed out some of the other communication with the other teams. But what we did discuss was challenges with second line management, and then trying to leap over that manager that you've employed to manage the team, which is always a bit of a challenge, and also the self-comparison that you go through. So this person is underperforming, or they're just not doing it how I would do it, or how well I could do it, right? So then you try and you're almost taking over their role, or trying to stop yourself taking over their role. That's really what we covered off.
Yeah, okay. They're the 2 main challenges that you've experienced. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, James. And it's as you say, once you get to that kind of once you start managing managers, it becomes even more difficult, because you are 2 steps away from the team that are actually delivering. So actually that how do you make that transition? We'll definitely talk about that a bit in today's session as well. And then we talked about this in the kind of previous session that we had as well, didn't we? That temptation to start picking up responsibilities that are your team's responsibilities. And if you do that, you get stuck back in the weeds of your business, and you don't really have that kind of then separation to be able to think strategically, to work on the bigger hitting items for the business. You just get drawn back into the day-to-day, which can be a bit of a trap that we all fall into, I think. Yeah. Thanks, James. Thanks, Sandeep. Anybody else in that group got anything else that was on their mind, or that they kind of took from the discussion? Pauline or Jason, anything that you'd add?
During the discussion, there was talk regarding if somebody is underperforming, maybe they don't have the passion. But then if we're talking on the flip side, rather than somebody junior, you might have somebody mid-level or senior level.
Yeah.
And they might have the passion. They're really good at what they do. They do the KPIs, so many calls, so many meetings, networking events, etc. Sometimes it could be the organization. So it's important to look at both sides. The management, the leadership team, whether they're aligned to the employees' core values, whether the company is really a great place to work. Because some management, I mean, not all, some companies, they might be so focused on driving revenue, driving their share
KPI.
price value, and they might have forgotten more the soft skills. Or you have companies, so many different reasons, focusing on expansion more on the technical side, and you have companies that might have legacy technology. Right now, in this day and age, everybody wants AI. They want to shine. Before, a couple of years ago, it was a blockchain. Now it's generative AI, chat GPT.
Yeah.
So if you have legacy technology, you're not going to sell. You can be the greatest salesperson on this planet. You can bring the horse to the water, but you can't force the horse to drink. So the question is, how do we deal with situations like this?
Wow, that's a nice one, Pauline. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. So actually, sometimes the organization or the business and the infrastructure and the way the business is set up actually starts to impact people's performance.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. Thanks, Pauline. Yeah. Great. We'll take that into consideration as well. Really good insight. Thank you. Good discussion, group one. Thank you. Room two was Artie, Hiten, Nadeem, and Stacey. Who'd like to give us some kind of themes of your discussion? I think Stacey tried to nominate Nadeem.
Yeah, so I'll just say what I brought up is sometimes attitude, negative attitude to changes and to different ways of working sometimes might manifest with one person but affect the whole group. And that's something that probably I struggle with. And the older styles of dealing with underperformance, like performance reviews. So you review their performance, you set objectives, but where do you go from there if the objectives that you set haven't been fulfilled?
Yeah,
I think that's something that I struggle with.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Stacey. You're absolutely right about the attitude piece, because there's that premise that if you got a barrel of apples, you put one rotten apple in it, everything starts to rot around it, right? And whilst that is a really good metaphor for a business, you get someone with a really negative attitude, everyone around them starts to feel the impact of that in a negative way. But the same is true for positive people, right? You put people with great attitudes in business and they lift everybody. And sometimes we have to, if we can recognize that we've got that ability to through attitude and positive outlook alone, actually inspire and increase people's engagement and commitment. Sometimes that can be the deciding factor. As leaders, we have a kind of overwhelming influence on people, more so than just their peers and colleagues. But that's really good. And then setting objectives and the review process and how we get people to engage with kind of managing themselves and meeting their own performance objectives. Right. We'll talk about that as well today, Stacey. Thank you. Very good. Anything else from room two? Anything from I know we've got Nadeem, Hiten, and Artie.
I think there was the resistance to change as well, Justin. I think that's a huge challenge, because it's okay putting a focus down on what objectives, what plans, where are we looking to go, but is everybody on the same page? And it's understanding, is everybody on the same page? And that's not always the case. And that's when you start sort of seeing some of the challenges that you start facing further down the line. Whereas if you tackled them right at the beginning, you probably would have a smoother ride, I would say.
There's a really good quote in Wayne's World where Garth turns around and says, when questioned, Garth turns around and says, "We fear change." And do you know what? I've seen that in every business unit I've ever worked in. When you come in and you introduce, so motivation around accepting change. The reality is everything is changing constantly.
Absolutely.
Perhaps using change because of its potential for driving a bit of fear and insecurity, then you need to get another title for it and you need to work it a different way.
Yeah, nice. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Nadeem. Yeah, that fear of change, if you think about it, it's probably more natural to be a bit afraid of change than it is to lean into it. You've probably got a top 10 to 20% of people that are higher performers, and that probably is the people on this call, right? And through that lens of the world that you see, you tend to lean into change, whereas only the top 10 to 20% are high performers or move into leadership. So actually, by default, your 80% are probably going to be a bit anxious, a bit resistant, without even realizing they're resisting it. But change won't be something that they can embrace easily. They're going to need encouragement, and they're going to need support to get through it. So fear of change and resistance, yeah.
And just to cap that off, if I may, the difference is it's the difference between vision and picture. And the leadership vision is very easy to whip up interest and things like that. And the picture is those people with their feet on the ground, realistically, and how that is blended, what that gap is, what the distance to cover is, and how all that, their share, their take on the vision. You've got to be, you've got to trust your people when you do things like that. But I'll let you carry on because you're going to tell us more about it.
That's really good. No, really useful information. Thanks, Jason. Thanks for sharing your insights. You've obviously done a lot of this, which is great. So room 3 was Fat Barber, Faraz, Parmesan, and Matt. Love to hear from your group. I don't know if did you get the chance to agree who would talk back to us?
No, we didn't. We actually saw the countdown, and we ended up getting thrown back into the main group. So no, we didn't. But a lot of good points. I'm fairly new to this kind of management role, and but from a mentor perspective, from colleagues that I've worked with, being an older chap, it's just communication is quite key. Attitude is number one. So they have to have the attitude in order for them to take on all the instructions and advice and guidance that you give them. If they don't have that attitude, then you're on a failed road anyway. My motto is change is inevitable. So at some point, change will always happen. So you've always got to keep yourself abreast of skills, and keep yourself look ahead. And it's about how the business kind of engages you and supports you, and lets you know that you will be part of the future strategy, because then that's your motivation. You've got to be engaged in the business, and if you're not engaged in the business and don't see your value, then it might be that's why you're underperforming, because you don't see it as this is your vehicle to get to where you're going in your life. So it's on a personal level, it's about how invested are you in that business, and I think that's quite important as an individual.
Yeah. And you know what, Matt, as you were talking, spoken like a high performer, right? Spoken like somebody that gets it. And that is very often our challenge, that some people don't have the same perspective. And it can be really difficult for us to even start to comprehend the way that people think and approach their work when we've always been at that level where, you've got commitment, you do see that the bigger vision, you're positive about it, you're trying to really contribute at a higher level. And reality is that not everybody's like that. So how do we manage those outliers? And that's the piece I think that's quite interesting for our discussion today. But appreciate you speaking on behalf of the group. Thank you, Matt. That's really good insight. Really good insight. Anybody else from that group would like to share anything?
I definitely, obviously, just like to sort of reiterate everybody's point. I think I agree with everything that's been said so far. I think there's some really fantastic points that have been made, and just thinking out loud, sort of after just recent contribution with Matt, is that I think definitely as leaders, obviously in my situation as a leader to be, I'm about a few weeks away from being in that role. I think it's definitely, as far as sort of my experience and what I have seen, which obviously albeit very limited, is I think there should be, a real focus, or a bigger focus, on the part of managers to understand and do training in terms of understanding personality types. Because obviously, if you're working in a team and you're the leader of the team, you need to understand if your team members, in, not to sound too crude, if they are resources or there are tools in a toolbox, which, if we put it down to the most basic sense, you are the conductor as the leader of the team, and you've got your your various instruments that make up your orchestra, and that's obviously when that all works together, you either do produce something fantastic and amazing that everybody can enjoy and everybody wants to be a part of, or it sounds a bit haphazard, and you may have some areas that are really functioning, others that aren't. And I think definitely from my own personal perspective of being managed when I was obviously in those roles, is the best leaders that I've had are those who've understood the personality type of those people who are working beneath them, but also take some time to understand and actually question their own team in that, what is your purpose? Because if you can get somebody's purpose and, obviously understanding their personality type and by extension, the values that particular person holds, when you bring the two together, I think Apple is a very good example of this, is that I think I've got sort of family members who work for them, is they actually do forms of personality testing. So they know sort of what role, given a person's particular personality type, and sort of how they respond, because this is obviously very well sort of researched areas of human psychology, is that actually you get the best out of that person. They perform at a much higher level because actually what they do is they take on the business's values as their own. So it's not something external. They internalize what it is that you want to create. And when you have those sorts of members in your team, actually you find that they become, as you said, one bad apple can spoil the lot, or actually you give that one inspirational sort of really driven person who actually engages with the team and the business, really drives everybody forward. So it's sort of thinking, well, that shouldn't happen by accident. How can we orchestrate to have more teams where you've got more of these sort of bright shining stars? If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, makes perfect sense. Yeah, thank you, Harbhajan. Yeah, absolutely. And I, a couple of things you said there: personality types, so that people's preferences. How do they like to work? How do you create an environment where they thrive and is optimal for them? And then the second, you talked about purpose and motivation. I think you're absolutely right. How do we get a really clearer view on each of our teams and what's motivating them to do the best work? Because when people are inspired and motivated, and they're doing work that they enjoy, and they find themselves being better at it, that becomes your sweet spot for high performance. I'm good at what I do, I enjoy what I do, it's purposeful and meaningful to me, and all of a sudden performance improves. If you've got any of those components missing, you're absolutely right, people will just kind of misfire, won't quite get to those levels of performance that they're capable of. Yeah, really good. Thank you, Harbhajan. Great conversations this morning, everybody. Thank you so much. I hope you've also enjoyed kind of getting to kind of meet your peers and colleagues as well. I find in conversations like this, we learn as much from other people's experiences as we do from our own. Let me share a couple of kind of topics with you this morning that will just complement what you've talked about so far already. So there's this report by FF Forney's Coaching for Improving Work Performance. It was back in 2000. It's quite well referenced and kind of tends to be kind of quite interesting in terms of what's happening behind the scenes in workplaces. So they've researched 16 reasons why employees don't do what they are supposed to do. And I learned this quite a few years back, and every time I go through the list, it makes me think, God, that's so important as a leader for me to understand what's really going on in a business. And I won't go through them in depth, but I will kind of share all 16 just so that you've got the headlines. The top two contribute something like 50% of the reasons. So reason number one, the person doesn't know what they're supposed to do. And that sounds really obvious, but the number one reason employees don't do what they're supposed to do is because they don't know what they're supposed to do. And number two is they don't know how to do it. So number one is I don't know what it is. And that might be, that if you're a high performer, if you're really good at what you do, someone else might just not know how to do it in that way, right? Or they might not know that that is something that's possible. And it links sometimes back to personal beliefs, self-confidence, but very often that's where the major gap is. They either don't know what they're supposed to do, or they don't know how they're supposed to do it. And so kind of almost tracking back with people and sense checking, talk me through what it is you believe you're supposed to be doing, getting right back to basics. And that sounds almost too simple, but I've had this experience myself when I learned this list, went right back with some of my underperformers and said, just talk me through, and what you'll learn is that they're thinking about things in a completely different way to you. they'll either be overcomplicating it, or they'll be putting barriers in place that just don't exist, or there'll be something there that you just you can really help them just to break through it just by slowing down, going back to fundamentals and having that conversation. And then the remaining list is kind of everything else that came out of this research. So they don't know why they're doing it, or they don't know why they should do it. So even though you've told them, even though they understand, sometimes someone's like, well, why would I want to do that? So there's almost this natural resistance. So it just stops, so they don't do it, right? Number 4 is they already think they're doing it. So actually, I think I'm doing what I need to do. And so that, again, kind of going back and just covering all the foundations to talk me through exactly what you're doing. Help me understand, what is it you're intending by what you're doing. So that people start to really explain it and explore it. 5 is there are obstacles beyond their control. So there's stuff that just gets in the way. This kind of links to Pauline's point earlier about, technology, about maybe outdated systems, maybe things that just, are in the way and they don't know how to navigate them or overcome them. Number 6 is that the person thinks it won't work. So you've told me I should do that, and it might work for you, but I don't think it will work for me. And I've experienced that lots of times where people will say, yeah, but that's how you do things, Justin. And they don't believe it will work for them. So we have to kind of explore some of these beliefs that people have. 7 is they think their way is better. So even though you've agreed, or you and they might have said, well, this is how we'll do the job, they think their way of doing things is better. And actually, sometimes as long as the result is what we need it to be, that's not such a bad thing. As long as people are getting the result and getting the performance, if their way is different, that shouldn't be a problem. But it's only if their way doesn't actually generate the result you're looking for. 8 is that they think something else is more important. So they've got other priorities. So they won't be committing because there's something else going on. And people don't always tell us this. That's the challenge. This isn't always transparent. And then remaining list, there's no positive. So this is interesting. There's no positive consequence for them doing it. So I can either do the bare minimum or I can do more. And actually, there's no real difference to me personally in those 2 levels of performance that people start to drift. 10 is there's no negative consequence. So negative consequence to not doing it. So if I do it or I don't do it, actually, there's no real difference for me. There's no material impact. And it's really interesting that if that really is about whether or not we are managing and leading teams and helping them to see their performance and the impact of their performance. If we don't do that as leaders, people can start to drift. No, sometimes there is a negative consequence to them doing it, i.e. I'll have to work harder, or it makes me feel more tired, or I have to concentrate more, or I don't get enough time for myself, or whatever that is, right? There's a negative consequence to them for doing it, for being, performing at the right level. 12 is there's a positive consequence to them for not doing it. So i.e. they get a bit more downtime, they feel more relaxed, it's not as much stress, whatever that is, and these aren't necessarily things that people think about consciously. It's just the cues they pick up from the work they're doing and the personal feedback they get. 13 is personal limits, so incapacity, people actually aren't able to do it. 14 are things that are going on in their life outside of work, and that is distracting and disturbing them, so they're not able to actually focus and do the work. 15 is fear. This was interesting. This was something that who was it talked about? Jason talked about this, didn't he? Fear, from Wayne's World, right? The fear of negative consequences. And then, of course, the final one is actually it's not possible. What we're asking of people is not possible to do. So I just like this list because it just kind of brings us back to some fundamentals around what might be happening with your team. I'll send you these slides afterwards so you've got them, and just have a think. When we're dealing with underperformance, it's really interesting to kind of think through these different reasons. But interestingly, here's a principle for us that research suggests that, and this happens in a lot of some of those more innovative companies. Someone mentioned Apple earlier. Companies like Apple, they're trying to create a culture where they switch employee expectations from giving feedback, I'll be giving feedback, to asking for it. And this is a cultural shift we have to make. We have to have conversations with our teams about this intentional switch. So instead of giving feedback, I want to ask for feedback. And when organizations do that, they tilt the culture toward continuous improvement, better decision-making, stronger, more resilient teams that adapt as needed. This was research out of New York University. But there's lots of kind of things here we can start to do. And, you know, none of these things happen in one conversation, but a series of conversations about trying to switch, instead of having to give feedback to employees, actually getting them to ask for feedback. Can I have feedback on how I'm performing? Can you let me know how I'm getting on with this part of my job? What else could I be doing? And if we can get people to make that transition, it makes our job as leaders much easier. And then, of course, talking of feedback, you know, research found 87% of people said they want to be developed in their job, but only 33% said they actually receive the feedback they need to engage themselves and improve. So that's interesting. So there's a disconnect between what people want and what as leaders we give them. Only 17% of feedback, so employees feedback, that only 17% of them said that the feedback they receive is meaningful or useful. They might get feedback that they don't find useful. Now that could be interpretation on their part, but it's interesting as leaders, you know, our job is to give feedback that's meaningful and useful so that people can actually use it to improve and progress themselves. And lots of research on kind of generational differences. You know, millennials and Gen Zs are actually, they want more feedback, they desire more feedback in the workplace than other generations, and that actually weekly is recommended. To give them regular weekly feedback can be really valuable, you know, motivating for them, and keep them kind of on track. They tend to be more open to that feedback and more willing to kind of lean into it. So some interesting things about feedback. Some of our conversations, we talked about leadership. I want to share this model with you. If you've been on a call with me before, you might have seen it before, but let me just walk through this model, because it's really as a model for kind of coaching as a leader. And if you look at a lot of the research on leadership development, one of the key, you know, one of the strongest leadership styles you can start to develop is coaching as a leadership style. Lots of books on it, including one I wrote called Coaching Leaders. And this is the model that we use with clients and through our programs and the work that we do in it. And once you start to get something in place that you follow as a structure, it can be really impactful, really powerful. So at the start, we think about the business plan, the plan that we have for the business, and considering the plan that we have as a leader for our business or our department or our team, actually just aligning key elements of that plan and making sure that there's direct correlation between what we're focusing on and our strategic priorities and what our teams focus on and how they contribute. And as simple as that sounds, joining up the dots between what your team are doing day to day and how that contributes to the higher priorities of the business can be really impactful for them and for you. So that strategic alignment is really important. So we get that alignment in place, the plan in place. And then we think about the center of our model here is about trust and relationships. So having a leader that trusts their team, having a team that trusts their leader is really important, because that creates the foundation for strong leadership, for being able to make requests of people, to kind of give them direction, to coach them, to be able to then lead that team effectively. We have to have the trust and the relationship in place. And the first step in our model, you know, we've got this model called Coach. First step in the model is what we call contracting. And I think Harbajan said he was going into a leadership position in the near future. One of the things that can be really positively impactful is to create, you know, a strategic agreement with each member of your team, or a contract, as we like to call it, about what levels of performance they will sign up to and what you will agree to do as their manager to help them to meet those levels of performance. And it's not about what they do day to day. It's about their attitudes, behaviors, you know, the kind of commitment you make to each other, agreeing that up front. And I've done this in different businesses that I've led in the past. It's been really powerful. I've noticed that when I've not done it, the difference in performance has been completely different, and my confidence to challenge people and my, you know, kind of ability and success in challenging people is completely different when I've got this contract in place, whereas versus at times when I haven't. So contracting can be really useful as a leadership kind of starting point for you. And then Stacey's point was around objectives and goals. So putting in place clear objectives with your teams, and then figuring out, right, what does high performance look like? What are the key components of delivery in that role? And getting it documented so that you and they agree. And then the big transition here then is that those objectives become the team members, not yours. So once you've agreed them, they are the team members to deliver on. And the review process I always recommend, monthly review cycle or process on objectives. And it's the team member's responsibility to bring their update and progress against those objectives to you, not the other way around. So it's them reviewing their performance with you and you coaching them on it. And one of the things that's also then kind of flows quite nicely from objectives and goals is actually creating some time to be able to observe your team doing their work. So observation and action. If you're working with your team in a close environment on a regular basis, that's easier. It's easier done. A lot of the teams I've managed in the past and led in the past have been remote teams, so it makes it slightly more difficult. But spending some time in meetings with them if they're dealing with customers, or if they're dealing with other people in the organization, or if they're running projects, but spending some time just alongside them, observing how they operate. Because that's really interesting. You will see, as a high-performing leader, you will see things your team member can't see, and from that position, it's a perfect opportunity then to coach them on changes, to coach them on improvements, to coach them on kind of attitude and behavior, characteristics and traits, understanding motivations. It's a really useful opportunity. But if you don't spend the time in observation, the coaching can be just more difficult because you haven't got that visibility and that capability to help them see things they can't see. And then the final part in our model is this H, which is heroes in the making. This is about development planning, getting people to see a bigger picture, a bigger contribution to your business. And if you follow this as a cycle, it becomes a cycle. So you keep repeating this as a process. And it's really powerful. It's a monthly, quarterly review cycle that just gets you in a position where you're just more confident, you're closer to your teams, they feel closer to you as a leader, and you're transferring responsibility from you to them. You really are coaching them and they're performing and delivering. Okay, so I've then also got a couple of steps around addressing underperformance, and then we'll take a bit of feedback, final questions, and then we'll wrap up because we will finish by 10. So underperformance specifically, we talked about that leadership model. So actually we have to be leading teams effectively. We have to be reviewing with them regularly. If we're not doing that, we're going to risk that those people that aren't as motivated, aren't as engaged, might see a performance drift. And if we don't address it, then ultimately we're endorsing it. And that's the key thing. We have to recognize that we're the ones as leaders that will have to step in as early as possible. And if we allow any of those kind of behaviors or performance issues to proliferate beyond, observations that we have, then we're going to find that will start to impact not only the team's performance, not only that person's performance, but the team's performance. And if we follow the right approach, we talked about that coaching model, we will definitely minimize underperformance, but there'll always be exceptions. And I talked about, review process. We should be having one-to-one reviews regularly with our direct reports. And the reason we do that is because the one-to-one review is a time to talk about their performance, to give them praise for where they're performing really well, and to handle any issues that might be coming up. If we're not doing that regular one-to-one, we will find that performance issues pop up, and we'll kind of wonder where they've come from, but actually it will be because we haven't been close enough to that person and not coaching and managing. So doing that is important. But in terms of dealing with underperformance, I talk about 5 steps, right? So step 1 is to instigate the discussion with your team member and tell them there's something important that we need to discuss. And that might link to a previous conversation you had in your contracting discussion about having difficult conversations, making sure that you were committed to improving their performance and supporting them. Then the second piece is really important. So we've instigated a discussion. The second piece is to agree on the situation. And very often when someone's underperforming, you might meet resistance in that discussion. So the way I recommend we do it is explain objectively what you're seeing and the impact of what you're seeing from that person, and then ask them what's going on. So get them to explain to you what's happening. How do you see it? And it's really interesting because sometimes that will either help them to become aware, or you'll see the disconnect between what they're doing and what they're thinking. So that's really useful. Agree on the situation is important. And then once you've agreed on the situation, so they'll tell you how they see it, you can tell them how you see it. Then what you need to do is switch focus from the underperformance to the level of performance you want. So what's the resolution? and asking that team member, how are you going to improve your performance and or behavior, depending on what you're seeing, right? And be as specific as possible. Agree with them on the specific changes that they'll make and the support that you'll offer. But remembering that, you know, when we're dealing with underperformance, this is the team member's job to pick up their performance, not your job to help them or make them do it. You're there to support them, but ultimately the responsibility is theirs. So we're really handing the baton to them to pick up their own improvement of performance. And then the fourth step is about gaining commitment. So once you've agreed on the resolution, to get commitment from them to change. And sometimes, you know, we might need a little bit of leverage. So we might need to be clear on the implications for them. If you can get this back on track, you know, everything's good. We'll get back to where we need to be. But if you can't get this back on track, there might be a situation where we have to put in place a formal process. It's just making sure people are, because this is one of the big trip ups I've seen, I've experienced and I've seen, is that we have to have this conversation with somebody. They start to improve performance.
Only been 2 weeks.
And then they drift back. And one of the big things is this commitment. Did we get, at the moment when we had the right leverage, did we get their commitment to change? Did we talk about implications? And so implications can be really important as part of that commitment from that person to improve. And then, of course, we need to make our own commitment. The commitment from us is to review and help them focus on their performance goals, but the performance is theirs to improve. And then finally, this piece that we call future pacing. So discuss specific future situations when you might see or anticipate issues and start to get them to be aware of what they will do to be proactive in addressing them in advance. So you're not going to just correct performance now. You want them to correct performance and be thinking, actually, in future, how do I maintain and even elevate that performance further? So in terms of 5 steps, this is the process I use. I found this really powerful for dealing with underperformance. And of course, if things don't come back on track, then we go into a more formal process, which we won't cover today. This is about course correction for people who aren't quite firing on all cylinders in the way that we believe they could and should be within the business. Okay, so that's the formal stuff for today. I'd love to hear your feedback on that. What do we think to that as a kind of structure for handling underperformance? Has it been useful in terms of addressing some of the points that you had when you came into today's conversation or session?
Yeah, certainly has for me. Yeah, I guess putting any structure around underperformance is good. I think what a lot of times happens is you see underperformance from the data, and then you have a one-to-one, which, you know, I've seen it happen. They have a one-to-one, and it's just an uncomfortable conversation. You need to pick up your socks, or bad things are going to happen. But to actually, have a process where you're trying to understand, trying to develop, trying to upskill, understand the situation, and then move that to a positive position is, it's obviously going to have much better results.
Yeah, because thanks, James. Yeah, I appreciate that comment, because what we can very often forget, we get kind of fixated by the underperformance and fixing that. Actually, what we want is that person to be performing at a high level. And sometimes, as obvious as that sounds, sometimes we get fixated on fixing rather than going, right, how do we reestablish the levels of performance that we want and support that person to do it? Sometimes we might have to take a step back to get them to take 2 or 3 steps forward. And that's fine. You know, what's really happening, you know, how do they see it? What are some of the challenges they're facing? And then kind of be able to help them overcome that themselves so they can then move forward and make the progress they need. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, thanks, James. Thank you. I'll send you these slides as well, so you've got that kind of roadmap of the 5 steps as well. It's good. Any other feedback on today's session before we close?
No, it's good. It was good, and it's very agile. All I would say is, for people out there, we touched on things about annual reviews and things like that. Don't wait for the annual review. Don't live your life by the calendar. You can harvest or stoke a lot of negativity if you skip over those points where you've got the opportunity to lift someone's performance. They may be small, so they do need the focus. And you're absolutely right in what you're saying there about the interaction and talking to people, getting them to be a stakeholder, and getting the contributions and the commitments clear on both sides. Because I've worked in businesses where we've charged people with jobs and said, off you go. And then you go back round and it's not working out. The business wasn't ready. It wasn't supporting it. The business needed to step up. That made a huge difference when it did.
Yeah. Very good. Thanks, Jason. I love your point there. You're so on it. Don't wait for the annual review. If you're waiting for the annual or even the quarter review, actually it leaves it too late. All of a sudden, you're then trying to kind of backtrack too far. Address it as soon as possible. Make sure that regular conversation with each member of your team is happening, because then you'll pick those things up and be able to address them in the moment rather than having to wait and kind of kick it down the road without realizing. Yeah.
And the one thing I'll give you is that everybody has a strength. And you as a leader, it's up to you to find that and use it, and either use it amongst the team, use it for yourself, or use it within the business. There is a way. Everybody's got something. Everybody's got some little spark in them, and you just got to dig deep and find it.
Yeah. I love that attitude. Thanks, Jason. Really, really useful. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm conscious we're at 1 minute to 10, everybody. This hour has just gone so quickly. Thanks so much for joining us. Does anybody have a final comment they want to make before we wrap up and close and enjoy the rest of our Friday?
I think engagement, as Jason has been alluding to, I think regular engagement, and that's where you will actually get the understanding both ways, because then expectations and quite rightly yearly reviews, you can't wait 12 months, 11 months and then listen to 11 months of negativity or you didn't understand me. So it's regular engagement and communication.
Yeah, thank you, Nadeem. Excellent. Yeah, good way to close. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. Pauline's just put her LinkedIn connection in the chat, so if you'd like to connect with Pauline, please feel free. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. I've put a couple of links in there as well. James has done the same. Thank you, James. I'll copy some of these and put them into our follow-up email to you all. I've put a couple of links in there. One is to a scorecard that I use for coaching leaders. So if you want to assess kind of coaching and your ability as a coach, or if you've got managers that work alongside you and you think that might be useful, it's like a diagnostic platform. A lot of my clients use it just to assess where they are in their leadership approach. The second thing I've put in there is a 45-minute strategy call link. So if you'd like to talk more one-to-one about your business, your team, what's going on for you, you want to do that in a one-to-one capacity. I'm an accredited executive coach. I love coaching conversations, so very happy to have a follow-up one-to-one with you if you think it would be useful. But other than that, thank you all so much for joining today. Have a wonderful Friday. Have a great weekend when you get there. And I hope to see you on a future session. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate you all joining us today.
Thanks, Justin. Brilliant.
Good stuff.
Really
Take care.
good.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Thank you. See you. Bye.